Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NFL edition. Actually, I forgot to share my screen here, so let me just do that real quick so you can see what I am looking at. And that is the projections for tonight's Week 10 Monday Night Football Showdown slate at DraftKings between the Rams and the Dolphins in LA. Obviously, this is not the most exciting game to most people, but it is an opportunity for you to make money, and my goal is to help you do that. Let's do that so I'm out of your way. Okay, perfect. So week 10 main slate for NFL was just absolute garbage. I mean, we definitely did hit on some plays. Loved Brock Purdy, loved George Kittle. I really like Bijan Robinson as a pivot from chalky Alvin Kamara. But it was Kamara and Aaron Jones and some of the other chalk guys were still really likable. Sam Darnold was in an amazing spot. So was Aaron Rodgers, and those guys just completely shat the bed. Like, it was brutal. But hey, hopefully you dodged some of those landmines and found a way to cash. It just was not the best main slate at all. So I don't know. I know I didn't win anything. And it was pretty rough out there. As far as the Munich Showdown slate, if you did tune in for that one before Sunday morning, you may have had some success. I love Chuba Hubbard as a contrarian captain play, and he smashed. And then a lot of the other plays that we liked, Tracy and stuff, that like those guys still did well. So hopefully you had a chance at doing well for the Munich game, and we're going to kind of try to parlay that into some success for the Monday Night Football Showdown slate tonight. If this video helps you out in any way, give it a like right now, please. And then also subscribe to the channel so you get alerted to more videos just like this. I'll be also pushing out some NBA or an NBA video for today's slate too. All right, so there is no ownership up just yet, and I think part of that is to do possibly with Tyreek Hill being a game time decision for this game. So I'm just going to walk through all the plays and just kind of go over my thoughts on them as far as how I like them, and also how I'm looking at them in terms of exposure and all that. So right off the top, right off the bat, Kyren Williams comes in with the best projection at 21 fantasy points. He faces a Miami Dolphins defense that has not been. It's kind of been a middle of the road matchup for most of the year. But let's see, they have not been amazing against running backs. No, they've been really bad against running backs. Actually, they are bottom 10 against fantasy running backs, giving up 10 rushing touchdowns and they have also been giving up production to running backs through the air. So Kyren Williams looks like a smash. The only issue with Kyren Williams at all is obviously going to be what his ownership is. Given the fact that Tyreek is iffy for this game, I think Kyren Williams is probably going to be the chalk play. He looks just like a really good play. He's at 10 plus fantasy points in every single game, so he's just got a really, really nice floor. He also has a nice ceiling with 3 games over 20 fantasy points, and he has like 5 games over 19 fantasy points. So he's been very, very good. And he scored a touchdown in every game but one on the year. Obviously, Miami is not a difficult matchup as far as giving up touchdowns, and the yardage should be there as well. So he's just got a monster roll, 20 plus carries in each of his last 4 games, 20 plus touches in each of his last 6 games. Like, just that's not going away. Primetime game, huge game for the Rams at home. They're 3-1 at home on the year. If they win this game, I think they get back to 500. So he looks really good. The only issue, like usual, is going to be how chalky is he. If he's going to come at 20% chalk, I will gladly slide him to flex in a good amount of my lineups and try to get different. Because if I can get different right away with whether it be Tua or Cooper or Puka, or if Tyreek is like low owned because nobody thinks he's going to play and then he comes out and smashes, that's going to be interesting too. So I will definitely look to get a little bit different, but I do not mind eating the chalk either. Kyren looks awesome. He has a shot at 20 to 30 fantasy points in this matchup. Tyreek Hill coming in with the second best projection. I mean, that matters if he plays. He's listed as questionable with a wrist injury. I mean, I got to think with a wrist injury, he probably has a really good chance of suiting up. I feel like I've seen conflicting reports all week. It's been, on one hand, it's been like very unlikely that he plays. And on the other hand, it's been like, it's not really concerned. So I don't think anybody really knows. I'm going to operate as if he is going to play, and I'm going to hope that his price, recent performance, and the wrist issue and the possibility that he might be out lowers his ownership. I don't really expect that to be the case. So it's just, we'll have to see where ownership is at and what his actual status is later. If he's in, he looks great. I have no qualms paying for him. I have no issue captaining him. The Rams have been, a relatively soft matchup against the pass. They've given up 11 touchdowns through the air, over 1,200 yards. So there's nothing there that scares me about the Rams for Tyreek. And honestly, with Tua back, he's been pretty quiet the last 2 weeks, but it's Tyreek Hill. At some point, he is going to pop off again. We saw his ceiling back in week 1 when he had 29 fantasy points. That's what he's capable of. He can break the slate. So if he's going to be chalky, I'm going to still get ownership to him. If he's going to be contrarian, I'm going to be way overweight. Now, if Tyreek is out, we got to start looking at the other Miami guys for sure, especially if their ownership is low. The first one, obviously, is going to be Jalen Waddle. He's going to see a massive spike in target volume if Tyreek is indeed out. He has been very, very quiet all year. Much like Tyreek, he has not done anything since that first big week 1 performance against Jacksonville. He's literally not top 10 fantasy points in any game since week 1 when he had 19. I don't think I care that much about that because obviously if Tyreek is out, it's just the role is going to be so massive it won't matter. The matchup with the Rams is one of the better ones he's had in a while. And this is the third game that Tua has been back. So provided Tua doesn't get another concussion here, I do think he and the Miami passing attack will have a good amount of success. So it's pretty simple. Waddle is absolutely a fair play if Tyreek is in, and he is a smash play if Tyreek is out. Next up, Cooper Kupp, monster projection. Kupp, not the best matchup by the numbers. Miami is graded out a little bit better against wide receivers, but not that worried about it. I do think I favor Kyren over the Rams passing attack, but I also think ownership's going to, suggest something similar. So that's why we could get a little bit away from Kyren in the captain and try to get Cooper or Nakua in the captain, possibly at much less ownership. Unknown. I don't know for sure if that's the case, but that's kind of where I'm leaning. Cooper Kupp has been really, really good. 35 fantasy points in week 1, 16 plus fantasy points each last 2 weeks. Had a nice rebound week last week. 11 catches on 14 targets, 100 yards, 24 fantasy points. That's who he is. So obviously Puka being healthy in there could kind of dilute things and bring them both down to kind of a, even level playing field. So that is the risk, but I think it makes a lot of sense to go against the grain here and captain one of these guys. No idea what ownership is looking like right now. My guess is Cooper Kupp would carry a little bit more ownership. So my lean is actually to go look at Puka if he is going to be overlooked here. Puka was very, very quiet in his last game. 1 catch on 4 targets. So that's a little scary. But recency bias, man. I mean, if people are all going to just flock to Cooper Kupp and Tyreek and Kyren at the captain, and that means Puka's probably going to go very overlooked. Let's not forget, in week 8, his first game back, he had 7 catches on 9 targets, 21 fantasy points. That's the type of game he can do, and we know he's actually capable of much better than that. So I like Puka as a probably contrarian captain on this slate. But I mean, as I'm alluding to, Kyren, Tyreek, Kupp, and obviously Puka, they all look amazing. One of my favorite options, though, is going to be Devon Achane, just because he's super explosive. And okay, if Tyreek is out, Achane's just going to be more involved across the board. He has been extremely involved as a receiver in games where Tua is healthy. He has 7+ targets in each game Tua has started on the year. Last week, he had 8 catches on 8 targets. He also had 63 rushing yards and 2 scores. Last 2 weeks with Tua back, 26 plus fantasy points in both games. He had 1 such game when Tua was out. So Tua being there helps Achane quite a bit. His role is going to be massive. And if Tyreek is out, it's only going to be bigger. I kind of hope Tyreek is in, so a lot of the ownership flocks to Kyren, Tyreek, and Kupp. And if they are going to be the ones that are owned and Achane's going to be overlooked, I love him for the captain slot for sure. Obviously, a really good flex play too. So Tua Tagovailoa, always risky because he doesn't really have a massive ceiling, does not offer anything on the ground as a runner. Obviously, there's always re-injury potential with his concussion history. On the year, he's had 1 borderline elite game, 21 fantasy points in week 1. He's been pretty quiet since coming back, 14 and 17 fantasy points. I think he obviously can explode. We know he has a ceiling, and the matchup with the Rams is pretty good on paper. But if he is going to get there, it's pretty likely that Achane, Tyreek, and or Waddle also go off and are even better. So I don't really want to captain him. I think he's an okay flex that you can always roster the quarterback plays. but I'm definitely looking at the skill position players for Miami before I look at Tua. Now, that probably means Tua is going to be pretty overlooked in the captain, at least compared to the other guys. So I don't have a problem with captaining him. It's just not going to be a priority for me because if he does explode, it's pretty likely somebody else is exploding, probably even a little bit more. Already talked about Puka. Puka, he looks like a really good contrarian captain. Good play across the board. Obviously, Cup is safer, I think. Cup is just safer and a really, really good play. But if the ownership is going to be, if there's going to be a sizable gap in the ownership, I think Puka is really, really interesting. Stafford is a lot like Tua, 0 rushing upside. He's had one game over even 18 fantasy points on the year. The reality is his guys feed on PPR value, and then Kyren finishes the job. So Puka and Cooper could both get 20 to 30 fantasy points here, and Stafford could still not hit 20. That's just the way they do things. They use him to dink and dunk and get down the field, and then the Rams kind of just run it in after that. So Stafford can still have a big game. Last 2 weeks ago, he had 25 fantasy points with 4 touchdowns through the air, but that was only his second game of the season with with multiple scores. So, I mean, viable, sure. But again, same thing with Tua. Does he really feel right in the captain? I don't think so, just because he does not have that, individual upside. And if he is going to smash, it's pretty darn likely that one of the other guys on the Rams is smashing even more. So Tua and Stafford are fine in the captain. You can do that. I just won't do that because I don't think the ceiling really is there to justify it. All right, so I already talked about Waddle. Now, after that, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, no, 8, including Waddle, 8, really good to elite options in the captain, which may get us very interested in looking for a dumpster dive play that can get us as many of these guys in the flex as possible. And good luck figuring out who it actually is. But I will say that this tends to happen very often with showdown slates where, we feel like we have to captain a Kyren or Tyreek or Cup. And sure enough, we need them. We need them in the flex. But then some other dude does just enough in the captain to allow that to deliver with all those guys in the flex. So who's that going to be? I don't know, but I will talk about a couple other guys that I think are viable in the captain based off of salary relief, or just could pop off. So one of the first guys is going to be Raheem Mostert. 9+ carries in each of his last 2 games. 9+ carries in each of his last 4 games too. So he's still pretty involved. Not always that involved as a receiver, but he does have 2+ targets in 4 of his last 5 games. Take that for what you will. He needs to score touchdowns to pay off, but he could definitely score touchdowns here. I mean, the Rams are 25th against running backs per DK scoring. So, if you like HN, you should still have some interest in Mostert because he's going to get probably, I don't know, if they're winning, about 15 touches. If they're not winning, probably 10 to 12. But yeah, if he scores, he can hit and he can break the slate for sure. So I have a little bit of interest in captain, but he is a little bit expensive at 11.1K. So I kind of prefer him at flex if I'm going to use him. But depending on where ownership is, if HN ends up being super chalky and Mostert gets overlooked, he is an interesting leverage play. I mean, for a small sprinkling of your lineups, I don't really want to get away from HN on this slate. I think he looks awesome. So DeMarcus Robinson is another interesting one at 8.4K. Obviously, all the ownership is going to Cooper and Pakua for the Rams passing attack, and for good reason. But he's been crushing. Two touchdowns in each of his last 2 games, 17+ fantasy points in those games, 27 fantasy points last week. I doubt it really keeps up, so I'm kind of hoping reverse recency bias helps us out here. And because he's a little bit cheap in the flex, ownership will gravitate there. But obviously he's crushing. So, and he's benefiting from the Rams being healthy. So he's viable. I just was he in the flex 5.6, totally fine. And if he keeps doing what he's doing, I mean, if you get DeMarcus Robinson at 8.4K in the captain slot, and he goes and gets 27 fantasy points like that, that'll do it. That'll probably get the job done. That said, it's just not something I want to do. I'm going to play the odds and go away from that. If you're running 150 lineups, you can get to some DeMarcus Robinson for sure. It's just I'm not super excited to play him. Colby Parkinson, he doesn't really have a role now that the Rams are healthy. Same with guys like Tutu Atwell. You know, there's just nothing. Tyler Johnson, these guys. He had 5 targets last week, but I mean, I think Tyler Johnson is interesting in the flex because he's really cheap and he is only 2.4 at captain. So you can take a shot at some of these guys who are just like total punts and then they let you load up in the flex. But if I was going to do that, I'd probably take a shot on somebody like Jordan Whittington, assuming he is fully healthy. He's got a shoulder issue and he missed last week. So if he is back, I would take a chance on him and hope that ownership flocks to DeMarcus or Tyler or something like that. If Tyreek is out, obviously a lot of the focus will be on Achane and Waddle, and for good reason. But if he's out, Odell Beckham at 3.6K and the captain is kind of interesting. 3 catches on 3 targets last week. He would just naturally be more involved. Is he a safe captain? No, but we know Odell still does. He could have a ceiling technically in an enhanced role here. A little bit of revenge game against the Rams too, so that could be interesting. I will also mention Malik Washington, really talented rookie, was a high volume guy his last year in college. He needs Tyreek out for me to feel really good about it, but both he and Odell would be potentially pretty involved if Tyreek is not playing. Miami tight ends, I don't know. I mean, you can punt with these guys. You have Julian Hill, 3 targets, 3 catches last week. Durham Smythe, 1 catch, 1 target. Like, these are just total punts. Doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to take those punts, but it does let you load up in the flex on these other options if you want to do that. You can even look at, somebody like Jalen Wright. Just how much is he really going to be involved behind both Achane and Mostert? I don't know. Blake Corum, if you want to save cash, but not really feeling super confident about any of those guys. I think it does come down to the Tyreek news. If Tyreek is out, then we can look at Odell and Malik. And you also can kind of play like an in-game entry angle with Tyreek. If Tyreek is active, you can just play like, oh, maybe they'll keep him limited or maybe he'll re-injure the wrist. And then somebody like Odell or Malik end up being really interesting. So let me refresh and see if ownership pops up here. I'm guessing not. Yeah. So I think without ownership, I think it's just very simple. If Tyreek is in, he looks really good. And it's just, I'll look at ownership and kind of make a decision on him. If Tyreek is out, Waddle looks amazing. And I'll have a lot of interest in Odell and Malik Washington. And I would give the Miami tight ends a little bit of a boost as well. If Tyreek is in, still like Achane, no matter what. If Tyreek is out, Achane looks like a total smash. Either way, I think Mostert is an interesting leverage play on Achane because he's probably going to be owned regardless of what happens with Tyreek. I love Cooper Kupp, but if he's going to be super owned, I think Puka is an interesting leverage play as well. And then both quarterbacks, Stafford and Tua, we should be interested in them, but I don't think I like them that much in the captain personally. The only other thing, let's look at defenses and kickers. Obviously, they are always a pretty good source of value. This game has a 45.5 total and a pretty tight spread. I think it's like basically a pick 'em. So not super interested in the defenses. Neither defense has really exhibited elite tendencies at all throughout the season. And both offenses are very, very capable of putting up points. So I don't know. You can always do it because they're not going to be owned. Rams are coming in. Oh, that we don't know ownership, but we can assume that the Rams and Dolphins will not be super chalky. So because of that, you can entertain using, one or the other in the flex, or you can kind of bank on this game not being very explosive and maybe even fire up both of them. I will probably not use either of them though. At kicker, we have Jason Sanders and Joshua Carty. On the year, Jason Sanders, let's see, averaging 7.8 fantasy points per game. He's been better, a little bit more reliable with Tua in, 9+ fantasy points in each of the last 2 games with Tua back. Joshua Carty, 6.5 fantasy points per game. I think I just prefer Sanders, but both these guys are okay. I think they'd be more like last guys in, just not like super priorities for me at all. All right, so that does it for me. A lot is going to be decided by ownership and by Tyreek status. So keep an eye on that and adjust as needed. If this helped you in any way, please give this video a like and also subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and good luck.